Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're playing the new Switcheroo seasonal event, which is an alternate game mode in which after each player takes their turn, we will switch hands. Today we are playing a new and improved version of what is already one of the strongest decks in this event, so let's go give it a look. So today we'll be playing a new and improved version of the Syndicate Pirates Cove deck that we played several times before in this event, using some improvements that you guys recommended last time round. The general idea of this deck is that with Pirates Cove, we can guarantee that we have a way to convert our coins into points. However, if we don't have any spenders in our starting deck, then that means this Sea Jackal that we get from our leader ability is the only possible way to convert coins into points. And because our opponent doesn't have access to our leader ability, that means we are the only one that can benefit from generating coins. And so that means we have entirely coin generators in this deck, and then we will just use one round of our leader ability in round 1 to win that, and then use another round of our leader ability in round 2 or round 3 to win that. And our opponents will have useless coin generators that they just can't get any additional value from at all. So that means that we have lots of coin generators in our deck, of course, with things like the Scapegoat, which is negative points for our opponents, the Beggar, Tax Collector, Swindle, 0 points for our opponents, Line of Credit, negative points for our opponents. And then we have a few new additions as well. Sewer Raiders for some thinning, and presumably our opponent doesn't have them in deck. Confession Extractor, 0 points for our opponents. Eavesdrop, 0 points for our opponents. Conjuror's Candle is one of the most significant additions here. Now, this is the one exception to what I was saying before. This is the one spending card that we have in our starting deck. The most important thing about this deck is that you do not let your opponent play this card. If you have it in your starting hand, you must play it turn 1. Otherwise, it defeats the entire purpose of the deck. But it is worth it, trust me, because what this does is it gives you some carryover, which would otherwise have been the key weakness of this deck. Because we have lots of time to generate coins in a long round 1 and benefit from that Sea Jackal, but in a short round 2 and or round 3, there isn't a lot of time to generate those coins, so getting some carryover from something like Conjuror's Candle is especially helpful, and it also means that if we use a Sea Jackal in round 1 and use a Sea Jackal in round 2, but maybe we overestimated how well we were going to do in round 2 and we actually didn't win, but we've used all of our leader ability charges, we're now out of spenders for round 3, and so those coin generators are just as useless for us as they are for our opponents. But if we have Conjuror's Candle carrying over into round 3, then suddenly we still have a way to generate some points from those coins. So in that way, it's a great backup plan and or way to save a leader ability charge if things don't go according to plan in round 1 or round 2. Then we also no longer have Devotion in this deck, which means we'll get Roach, as well as Knickers coming out from our deck, giving us a little bit of additional value in round 1. Now, our round 1 is really strong. It's our round 2 and round 3 that are our biggest weaknesses, so it's not going to be a huge factor, but obviously it helps. And you saw we have some artifacts in our deck, which means we can actually use Golden Nekker here, and because none of the cards in our starting deck cost more than 9 provisions, we can get a unit, an artifact, and a special card out of this, and it's pretty unlikely our opponent is going to be able to benefit from Golden Nekker, so either we play it immediately and get all that benefit, or if we have a couple of powerful cards in our hand at the start of the round, then we might be able to still pass our hand over to our opponent with Golden Nekker in it and not worry too much about them taking this, or if they do, they might play it for 0 points just to deny us the opportunity to play it, which is not the end of the world. Then because we no longer have Devotion, and because we no longer have any cards that cost more than 9 provisions, that means that we can use Ciri Nova for additional way of getting carryover. And again, because round 2 and round 3 were previously the biggest weaknesses of this deck, getting Ciri Nova and 8 points of carryover from her is absolutely huge. So of course this is another card that you don't really want your opponent to be using, but because it only works if your opponent also doesn't have any cards that cost 10 or more provisions in their starting deck, it's unlikely they'll benefit from Ciri, even if they're the ones that end up playing this. But obviously, it's a big, important card, so if you do have Ciri in your hand, you want to try to make sure you're the one that plays her. Then again, the longer she's on the board, the more time you're potentially giving your opponent to purify her statuses and get rid of that resilience, so really the ideal way to play her is wait until your very last turn, and if you're on blue coin, use Curse Scroll to swap out one of your opponent's bad cards and instead replace it with Ciri and play Ciri at the very end of the round when your opponent has little to no time to counter her. Other than that, we have the Flying Redanian, which is another way of getting a little bit of carryover once we get up to 9 coins. And we have Doadrick as well, which is another card that ideally you'll want to make sure your opponent doesn't get the chance to play, because the idea behind him is you play him, and because he can switch cards in your hand with cards in your deck, that means when you have your opponent's hand, you can use his ability to put one of your opponent's cards back into your deck and replace it with one of your cards. So if it looks like your opponent is trying to set up some big combo, then you can potentially disrupt it using Doadrick. But for that same reason, you don't want your opponent to play Doadrick, otherwise they can replace your coin generators with other cards that are more directly beneficial to them. So there's a look at the deck, and overall it is greatly improved because it covers for what was previously the deck's greatest weakness, not having a very strong round 2 or round 3. It is, however, a little more complicated to play because, of course, there are cards that we want to make sure we get the chance to play with Golden Nekker, Ciri Nova, and Doadrick, and definitely the Conjuror's Candle. For that reason, it's a little riskier, but with Cursed Scroll, you can, of course, control that a little bit, and with your mulligans at the beginning of round 1, you just want to be really mindful of making sure that you aren't passing over one of your most important cards to your opponent and allowing them to suddenly gain access to some really important things like a coin spender or a way to disrupt the cards that you have in your starting deck. And if you want to check out the previous versions of this deck, I've included the links for those in the description. But with all that being said, let's go see it in action. Now, unfortunately, once again, I still have a really stuffy nose and really sore throat, so I had to minimize the amount of in-game commentary, otherwise I'd never be able to get this video out. Alright, so going up against Northern Realms here, and if we are not using the best deck in this event, then they definitely are. And we're starting off with this match because this is a perfect example of a game that, with the previous versions of this deck, we would have had no chance of winning. But with all of our new carryover that we've added in, suddenly it makes a world of a difference. Okay, so going up against Nilfgaard next, and the tricky thing about going up against Nilfgaard is that they potentially have several ways to create copies of our Sea Jackal, and of course, that is the key card of this deck, because if they can create a Sea Jackal, then that means that suddenly they can benefit from generating coins, and all these cards that normally we'd be fine giving to them because they give 0 value to our opponents, those cards are just as beneficial to them as they are to us. So once again, that means that having a more versatile deck that doesn't rely entirely on the Sea Jackals to win could be the key difference maker here. And lastly, we'll be going up against another Northern Realms deck here, but a different deck this time, and one that might have initially looked to be not as strong, however, had a couple of nasty surprises that could have caught us off guard. So there's a look at a Syndicate meta deck for the new Switcheroo seasonal event. If you liked the video, then make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment down below to let me know which other cards, archetypes, and factions you'd like us to experiment with next. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.